led some of those efforts in the past, and maybe those efforts stalled, at some point along the way. And we felt like there's a time and a place for everything to really get energy and momentum. And we really felt like we had all the right leaders in the early learning space right now that are very collaborative in the way we operate. And we as a school district can kind of give everyone the compelling why. And so we really felt, and I will introduce Tracy Brown. She is the Assistant Superintendent for Academic Support and Federal Programs, and her early learning team, we have many of them in this room today that meet on an everyday almost basis, but I meet with them almost weekly or bi-weekly just to kind of keep abreast of everything that's occurring. But we really felt like 2 years ago it was time to really bring everyone in the room together again. And so really develop a more strategic plan with all the right leaders, all the right thought partners in the room, because early learning, there's so many players in that space that do great work. And everyone's working really hard in that space, and maybe the coordination of that work can make the outcomes more significant. And then, like I said, we become the benefactors of that in Hillsborough County by having students come in kindergarten ready. So Teach Me Early, what is our initiative here in Hillsborough to really bring some of the main principal partners together that are up here, but also many of the partners that you see in this room today, they play a role on that. And so, in developing that strategic plan, we are at the point right now where we've identified where our gaps are. And that's really what our first initial phase of this was to do. Identify where our funding gaps are, where our service gaps are, what space we sometimes duplicate efforts in. And so it's really identifying all those things so we can bring better coordination to all of our spaces and ultimately, align all the work out there in our community to deliver on the kindergarten residents.
Awesome. And to do that work, one of our major partners here, I'm going to introduce this, Jane Murphy, and I'm going to start with you because you start with the family and with very young families as they're just beginning. So can you tell us a little bit about Healthy Start Coalition and the work you're doing?
Sure. Healthy Start is one of 32 coalitions in the state. Florida is unique that we do prenatal screenings at the first prenatal visit. We have a screening rate that's in the 70, 75% rate for moms, but then for babies, our screening rate in Hillsborough County is 98%. And in Hillsborough County, we have staff at most of the delivering hospitals, and they do a face-to-face triage. Can you hear me? It's on. They do is this better? Yes. They do a face-to-face assessment with the mom and screening so that we are able to say not only what are you eligible for, it's sort of the triage for the system of care, but what do you want? I want someone in my home to help me because I know I've got a lot of things going on. I just need a car seat. Do I have a safe place for the baby to sleep? I don't have that. Let me help you get somebody that can get that for you. And then we triage for parents as teachers, nurse-family partnership, healthy families, and WIC, all of those systems that are out there. We're also the lead for, we have a Safe Baby program. We've looked at Healthy Start's overarching goal is to reduce infant mortality. We looked at what are the leading causes of infant death and safe sleep, safe caregiver, coping with crime. So we've educated through Children's Board funding over probably about 16,000 professionals in how to keep your baby safe, and then they could go out and educate families. We educate the hospital staff, the nurses, and all of that. And we're also, our newer initiative, we started about a year and a half ago in the WIC offices with Children's Board funding where all the WIC moms are there, and we have an opportunity that they may not get access to care. And then we also partner with the Children's Board Family Resource Centers, which if you don't know about them, and I was so excited that you mentioned them, they really are a hub, a community hub for services. Anybody can walk into a resource center, young families especially, and say, I need this, and they're going to help you find it. We've got everything from tutoring in the afternoons that we partner with the schools. We've got child development. We've got health and safety, and all of those things going at 6 of the Children's Board Family Resource Centers. In a nutshell.
That's pretty good. And well, and you mentioned that after, you're working with very young families, when they start to look for organized care, I'm sure they're going to start to interact with Mr. Gillette down there, and then through the Early Learning Coalition. So how about you tell us a little bit about the Early Learning Coalition and what you provide in the way of early childhood education programming and after-school activities?
Sure, thank you very much, Nicole. The Early Learning Coalition in Hillsborough County is the second largest of 31 early learning coalitions across the state of Florida. And we have two primary programs. School Readiness, which offers families that are below 150% of the federal poverty level subsidized child care and quality child care homes. And BBK, or Voluntary Pre-Kindergarten, which offers full access to all 4-year-olds free of charge pre-kindergarten training, either for a full school year or a summer program. And we're very happy to partner with the Hillsborough County Public Schools, which has a number of BBK classrooms, as well as a lot of private providers in our community, both in BBK and in school readiness. So that's what we do. I would just make a comment. Jeff talked a little bit about collaboration. I feel very honored to be on the stage with all these folks that have spent their careers working in education. I've got a little bit different background. I'm an engineer, and I worked for Tampa Electric Company and Peoples Gas for 36 years and was the CFO and CEO of those companies. And so my background is different. And when I first came in, I noticed all the differences between the electric business and the gas business and education. And there are a lot of differences. But I'm noticing a lot of similarities. The utilities across the state of Florida work together to maintain the grid. When there's a storm, the utilities work with all of the local agencies, including the Sheriff's Department and the local EOC, the county officials, the school district, which is a shelter for families in storms, and their local utility. And I see a lot of parallels in the necessity to do things in a collaborative manner, to do things right in real time. And it's a very exciting time to join this industry because there are a lot of great things happening. There's new federal funding available for school readiness. We have a clear wait list at the Early Learning Coalition, and we've had a clear wait list for 6 months for the first time probably ever for our program. And we've increased the enrollment about 30%. And so we're making some great strides, but it's with these other partners that we're making those strides. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Kelley Parris, your organization has been mentioned more than once now on the stage because you really do serve as a backbone and a connector for all of these different programs. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the Children's Board?
Well, I'm not very exciting, so I'll go right to the Children's Board because it is very exciting. We are a special taxing district, and those of y'all that live in Hillsborough County and look at your tax bill for your property in your home, you will see that the Children's Board is funded through property tax. We have, our mission is focused on ensuring that children are ready to learn, healthy, and safe and stable families and developmentally on track. We are very invested in this space of early learning, and the reason why is because about 3.5 years ago, we were looking at our budget, and we're spending about a quarter of our budget on remedial work. So in order to get out in front of this, we had to do something bold. Gordon does a great job of school readiness and BBK, but there are more providers out there than just school readiness and BBK. So we started focusing on these other providers, the other system, the non-system. And we built very quietly our own little funded system around really providing supports and services to the non-system so that all children could be afforded the opportunity for high quality early learning. And we came up with some pretty innovative programs, and I would like for Sarah and Marnie to stand because their teams are part of really quite a unique system. So Sarah, we knew that we were had coaching, we had some supports in for those children that are in centers, but what about the ones that weren't in any early learning environment? So we looked at the schools that were the bottom 20 for ready to learn scores. We did a 10-mile radius around those schools, and we walked those neighborhoods to see where those kids were. Those kids were in check cashing stores, they were in tiendas, they were in the laundromat, and we decided that we were going to add 5 each year till we got to those 20 areas. And it's really a program to draw those parents and or caregivers and children out and to expose them to services to ensure they're ready to learn when they're in kindergarten. Now, I have to say, I went to one in Sethner last week, and there's a 90-year-old man that has guardianship of his 5-year-old great-grandchild. He was a business owner. He said, I didn't raise my children. My wife did. My wife taught my children. She now has Alzheimer's, and I have this child. So he went back to USF, got a degree in education so he could teach this child. Wow. And he comes every week to the Learn and Play Tampa Bay group, and I can't tell you what this has meant to him. So Sarah, thank you. Marnie, thank you. And we do lots of things, but I love the early learning professionals, and I think every child deserves the same equitable learning opportunity.
That's impressive. Superintendent Eakins, so tell us a little bit about your ideas around the impact that you can have in your role as a superintendent. I think if you look nationally, you will see more and more superintendents finding a seat at the table in this conversation about early childhood. So how are you seeing your role in influencing this area?
Well, I think as the main hub for K-12 education, we can be the force that really brings the call to action in our community with the entire story. I think that's one of the things that, as I said earlier, when we have so many strong advocates here in our community that have brought call to actions in the past around early learning to ensure better investment in early learning and more funding, more coordination around that. What happens is sometimes those call to actions might fall on either deaf ears or people aren't listening close enough that can maybe help with solving some of those issues. It could be a legislative issue or whatever. But what happens is they may not be able to tell the rest of the story in a compelling why. And I believe a school district that becomes part of the agencies locally can help finish the story. To go all the way to where Ms. Schamberger and I were just a few minutes ago, to events where we're seeing students that are graduating and going on to the workforce. And then we can really start with that end in mind and go all the way back into the early learning space. I know when I came in as superintendent, one of our staff members really worked hard in unpacking the cohort of students that graduated all the way back to 3rd grade, and even looking at kindergarten readiness rates of cohorts of students. And so what we find is we really have the data that everyone needs to know about. And that data is pretty powerful about students entering kindergarten ready, and how they become on grade level. By 90% of them become on grade level 3rd grade readers. And we know that if they're on grade level 3rd grade readers, 90% of those are going to graduate 9 years later with their cohort. And if we do the right thing in that space, you can literally say that if they're kindergarten ready, you are preparing students for the workforce here in this region. And so those are the kind of stories we as a school district can help the masses understand a little bit better and connect all the dots. So it behooves us as a school district to be a major player in this space to ensure that, because like I said, we are the benefactors. And I know that we have lots of principals and leaders in the room here today, and they hear me talking about, we're out working with people in the community. Well, here are the people, all right? Just so you know, these are the people that we're working with in all their spaces to coordinate so that we can ensure we build the capacity in our local community so that we can take the hands of the great teachers we have in Hillsborough County and get them to that finish line and launch the workforce.
Wonderful. I think you've mentioned the pipeline and how much of the pipeline you have from cradle to career. And you've got kindergarten, whether it's kindergarten entry or 3rd grade reading or 8th grade math or college and career and graduation rates. So we've started to talk a lot about that pipeline, and thankfully we started to include what happens before. And it's wonderful that we're talking more about what happens before, but what often also gets lost is before. So in that 0 to 3, that birth to 3 years of age, there's increasing attention, I think, to the importance of how children get here and what their needs are when they get here. And so you started to talk a little bit, Jane, about the different services and resources you all provide. But I wonder if you could share a little bit more about what you have available to assist parents before that, at the beginning of that pipeline.
Well, I think when I first started out, we didn't have the knowledge to know that 80% of the child's brain develops in the first 1,000 days. And that how important the work that we're doing and how important it is for women to be healthy and for women to be able to have full-term births. And so part of our work is to do everything we can to help that mom have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. But also to work with the mom between pregnancies for interconception care so that her chronic medical conditions, her mental health, her situation at home, and she's able to make choices for herself and make sure she's healthy. I sit on the Pregnancy Associated Mortality Review, and we see what happens when things don't go right. So we're working as a state to really look at interconception care. Mental health is a huge component. When I grew up, it was if mama wasn't happy, ain't nobody happy, and I believe that. You have to know my mother. But it's still true today. But the thing with mothers' mental health, we have a big component of trying to support moms in the home, get mental health services through Healthy Start and Healthy Families. And I think that's really, if mom is depressed, even as a newborn, when I was a social worker back in the day, I would look at that baby, and if that baby wasn't smiling, I looked at the mom, and you could see the baby wasn't smiling because the mom wasn't smiling at the baby. It's the same thing about talking and reading and helping very early make those differences and create those habits so that moms are doing the best. And also, we focus we need to focus more on dads. Mom, for us, is a captive audience, but we really see the need to do more with the dads. And I also want a full confession. We've been somewhat in the silos as far as birth outcomes. We're maternal child health. And we have, through this initiative, we've really looked at where we can get outside of the box, outside of the silo, because we see face-to-face 17,000 moms face-to-face, which we're huge. That's bigger than 11 states. That's just Hillsborough County. So we do have the opportunity to influence and I think having that same message prenatally, postpartum, in the hospital, and as we carry through the other programs is essential.
Absolutely. And so moms hang out with you, and dads, hopefully increasingly more and more hanging out with you, and hopefully we're delivering children to Gordon. Because you're working with organized early childhood programs and services. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of those programs to ensuring that children are ready?
Sure. So, thank you, Nicole. We focus on basically 0 to 5 at the Early Learning Coalition in Hillsborough County. And we've got two groups, large groups, kind of operational groups in our nonprofit. One is family services and the other is provider services. And we really give those equal importance because our initial connection is with families, either with kids that are 0 to 3 or kids that are going into BBK, and those are very important interactions. And we're placing more emphasis with our additional resources that we're getting from the federal government and elsewhere, and human resources. Some of my team is right over here from the Early Learning Coalition on 0 to 3 these days. We did a community needs assessment and saw a severe lack of infant and toddler slots in private childcare. And so we acted very quickly on that, and we've increased the rates that we pay for infant and toddler slots in school readiness. And we also are instituting a program coming next year of contracted slots where we actually pay childcare providers to open new infant and toddler classrooms as well. So a lot of interesting things there. In BBK, we've got a ways to go. The good news about Florida is access is fantastic to BBK. As I said, any parent that has a 4-year-old, and there are 17,000 4-year-olds at any given time, can have their kid in a BBK program. We have well over 70% of the kids in Hillsborough County, 12,000 plus kids that attend BBK. And so there's some great opportunities there, but the kindergarten readiness rate across our county and the state is close to 50%. Those that have completed BBK is a little higher, approaching 60%. But we really there's a standard in the state that we want to have 60% of every child care provider provide kids, or that we want 60% of all kids that graduate from BBK programs at least to be kindergarten ready. And so we've got a ways to go there. So on the provider side, there's an awful lot going on there. And when I came in, I kind of went back to some of my early psychology, and I didn't take much of it because I trained as an engineer, but thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs a little bit, what we see in the provider community is that there's obviously a need for health and safety. There's a need for a good social, emotional environment in classrooms. But we face some major challenges in early childhood in the private provider network in terms of pay for teachers, education for teachers, and those make it difficult to provide quality early childhood education and interactions. And so with some of our newfound resources, we're taking some very new initiatives on that front as well. We've started a wages program to provide wage supplements to teachers in early childhood in our county, and we quickly, because we're such a large county, become the largest to offer a wages program in the state. We're providing stipends to the Teach Scholarship that the Teach Scholarships provides early childhood professionals 80% of their tuition. We're helping with that last 20% in our county as well, and working also with Kelley and the program Keys that she talked about, and other professional development folks across our county from USF, HCC, the Lastinger Center, ECC, to offer a slate of professional development programs for teachers in our early child care centers that are coordinated and offer the very best training we can for our teachers. So there's a lot going on, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Excellent. And then you're working together with the Children's Board in some of your initiatives. You talked a little bit about some of the programs you have going on. Can you tell us a little bit more about the ways in which you're supporting across the pipeline? Because the Children's Services Board has ownership of children's lives, really, and touch parts of children's lives all across that pipeline.
When we started looking at this system or non-system 4 years ago, we took it piece by piece. First of all, we had a town hall meeting with early learning professionals to find out what their barriers were to high quality in their system. And we at the Children's Board are firm believers that you have to go to the community and you have to ask them what their needs are. And so they had three very distinct needs. One was parental involvement, one was discipline, and one was an administrative issue that was taken care of with a phone call. And that had been going on for 16 years, and nobody had addressed that issue. So the beauty of going to the community cannot be discounted in any way. But we began to look at this system. We made a 5-year commitment. We called around to other states. We looked at what they were doing, and the COM project was birthed out of this. And so that's Marnie's project that stood up. So that's conscious discipline awareness model. So it's built on the conscious discipline tool to be used in the early learning setting. But we have positive behavior supports in centers, and that's provided by USF. We expanded our inclusion services because we firmly believe that every child needs to maximize what their abilities are. We have infant mental health that we expanded. We wanted infant mental health to have a capacity in Hillsborough County to meet the needs. We have mobile developmental screenings. We have the COM project. We have the high quality early education system, which is a partnership between the school system, child care licensing, and HCC, and they do really looking at the early learning practitioners model, and they do everything from business support. How do you support, building the business model to coaching and teaching. And then, of course, Learn and Play Tampa Bay, which was Sarah's model. We also do Hippie, Parents as Teachers, on and on and on. I could go on and on. We do 2 million with one agency in tutoring. So there is a lot out there that we do and we support. And it's not only that, the face of the family looks different today than it did 10 years ago. So we provide the school social work some dollars if they support those families. If we don't meet the concrete needs of these children and families, the children are not going to be able to learn. So it is not just early education and tutoring. We know that the child that has a great high-quality early education has a better chance of not ever touching those larger systems of care, juvenile justice, child welfare, on and on and on. Their health outcomes are good. But when I came here 6 years ago, we served 78,000 children and families. Last year, we served over 204,000 children and families. So the need is there. And the more times that we can touch those children with doses and doses and doses of love and education, the better community we're going to be.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question for each of you, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the teachers in the room, because I imagine there are quite a few teachers in this room, correct? And who we all love, and we love what you do every single day, and we know that you're out there on the front lines and supporting children and supporting their families in ways in which you have never been asked to do before. And it's a challenge. And so as you're hearing about all of these resources that are available, I'm sure one of your first questions is, how do I get to them? How do I get in touch? Who do I call? What do I do to take advantage of these phenomenal resources that are available in your community? And so for each of you, I thought I'd ask, how can they become engaged in this work that you're doing and find ways to bring those resources to their children and families in the schools that they're in?
I didn't know we actually developed an app because of the families that, and I can have it sent out for families and for professionals, where you put the zip code, you put it in, it's very easy, and then it connects you to all the services. So if someone's in a zip code and there's only this program, and it also, if a program is at capacity, you don't get a referral to it. Having been a social worker for 25 years, nothing's more frustrating to the family than to give them a referral and then they get a call and say, oh, well, that's not the right place. So it's called Parent Connect, and I will send it out, and you all can use that. We also have a central intake unit that folks can call into, but the app, and we actually, I think it was somebody from Early Steps that said, people out in they don't have time to keep, we used to carry a resource directory like this. Everything should be up to date, but also the person that they contact, they get a direct email back that there's a circle. And then we track it and see what happens with that. So I can send that out.
Awesome.
Well, I think in the school district, it makes sense for us to be more engaged with our early learning space. And sometimes we get so caught up in what we do that we ultimately, take our eyes off what we could be doing to actually prevent some of the challenges that exist in K-1-2 in our schools. So I know we're engaging in the project with the ELC. We always have been partnering with the Children's Board and Healthy Start Coalition, but this is really about our teachers and our schools becoming more engaged with their local providers and the services that are in that space. I know right now in our highest need schools here in Hillsborough County, the Early Learning Coalition has kind of mapped up all of our early learning providers. So now we have that space that our teachers, our leaders at those schools can start to engage with families at those provider sites. Some of our kindergarten teachers engaging with some of our local provider teachers to help them understand a little bit more about alignment and readiness and what that looks like in a kindergarten space to really kind of build out their understanding. Because as Gordon said, it could be, we have a lot of great staff in our early learning sites across the community. They may not just know exactly what it is that kindergarten readiness looks like and feels like, so we want to make sure we engage them in a stronger way. So it's really us kind of becoming less compartmentalized and more connected in how we do our work.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you teachers out here, because teachers aren't just teachers anymore. They're teachers, they're social workers, they're housing support specialists. There are a whole lot of things now besides your traditional teacher. We fund 66 programs in the community. And those 66 programs fit into one of those buckets that I talked about earlier. But we also operate something called an ASO. And some drunken sailor named that because it doesn't describe what it does at all. It's an administrative services organization. It is a pot of money that is easily accessible by anyone that has a case management plan, family support plan, and it's a payer of last resort. If this mother or father's car breaks down and they can't get their kids to school, they can't get to work, this pot of money will pay for that. It's a quick turnaround, it's almost instantaneous. If you need a check this afternoon, you get a check this afternoon. But it keeps so many individuals out of housing insecurity. It keeps so many individuals and children in their homes where they're safe. And those flexible dollars are key to the health and safety of children and families in this county. Because we know that we're all restricted with state and federal dollars. And, 30 years ago, the citizens of this county had the good fortune of passing a referendum when they knew that children and families need supported, that make it available to keep these kids safe. So those supports are out there. They're not hard to find. On the Children's Board website, and we also have a family guide that's printed.
I'm going to chime in on the ASO. If we identify that mom is going home and there's not a safe place, there's no bed for that baby, we can directly access ASO funds, and before that baby goes home, that baby can have a safe place to sleep. And that's one of the practical things. There's a whole lot more that they do, but it really makes a difference in the lives.
And I would just say to teachers and school district employees, you know this, but you've got a great leader. Jeff is doing amazing things, and I just want to tell you a quick little story. We had a provider meeting, and we do this every year, where all of the private child care providers come to a big meeting and hear what's going on in our programs and those kinds of things. And we do it in English and then in Spanish. Jeff came to that meeting and spoke about the partnership that he discussed, where we're working together at the achievement schools and connecting child care centers, both relationship-wise and putting a work plan together for kindergarten transition. And I think that was a Saturday morning. Jeff had, I think, 4 or 5 other engagements that Saturday, but he started his morning with us. And so we're so happy at the Early Learning Coalition to be a partner with all of you at the school district. We partner on other things. In Hillsborough, many of you may know, there are best-in-class inclusion services, and we're working with the school district on inclusion, and we'll continue to do that. And I would just say, as you all would know, your strategy, because I know Jeff and Grayson and the team do a good job of communicating, but we're knowing that your strategy involves early learning, knowing that your strategy involves achievement schools, and yes, 3rd grade FGAT and high school graduation. The Early Learning Coalition is very pleased and proud to be participating not on just one early learning, but achievement schools as well.
So they were not forewarned that I was going to ask a question about data. So I'm not going to ask a question about data, but I would not be doing my fellow colleagues in the room who are researchers without asking a data question. But I'm not going to ask a data question. I do think I want to highlight at least that each of you have talked about how you are gathering information on the programs that you're providing, on the individuals that you're serving, on the family, on the environment, on the school, on all these different indicators that will let you know how it's going, to be able to tell your story and to be able to improve. And so, perhaps not a question, but would you like to share how it is that you are engaging with all of this information you have and how it helps you move forward for children and families? So it wasn't really a question.
And I'll start out. That's really what is interesting yesterday at the early childhood meeting that Tracy was convening. Where's Julie McLeod and her group of data folks over there? They are part of that team, Amanda and Julie in the back. They really bring, the data, the updated data to keep us kind of in the, between the rails, so to speak, on some of the things that we're doing. But it drives everything that we do as far as our strategic planning that we do in our school district. So it's something that we look at all the time. We say we're a data-driven school district. That sometimes sounds a little wonky, because we are really about kids and caring for kids and building relationships. But at the end of the day, we have to get results. In order for this community to see, early learning as the true game changer that we think it is, and we know it is here in this room, we have to give them data all along the continuum to show them how the investment early ultimately will lead to the workforce that the industry is looking for out there, that our chambers are looking for, that our economic development corporation is looking for, and that's why, I go to those organizations with the same data. It's very rare that you see a superintendent of schools going to the chamber, Tampa chamber, and talking about early learning. That's exactly where I was 2 years ago with my conversation with the Tampa chamber about why I believe, and our organization believes, that will really change and sustain the workforce here in Tampa Bay. And so that was very well received. They included it as part of their strategic plan, in the Tampa chamber, because they do believe in that work and that investment.
The data drives a lot of what we determine the funding needs are, but you can't take, and I appreciate you saying this, Nicole, earlier, you can't take the human factor out of it. So when we had a huge release last year of about $26 million, but the way that it was determined what we were going to fund was we started out with 6 town hall meetings across the county. We gathered what information from individuals that attended those meetings, what they felt like their needs were in their area of the county. It's so important because Hillsborough County is so large. Then we did focus groups after we gathered that information. Then we looked at demographic shifts. And then we looked at population shifts. And then we put all of that information together to determine what we were going to fund with this $26 million. One of the things that we determined in South County was there were only 5 early learning centers in South County. And that is a very unique population, heavily Hispanic migrant farmers down there. So we funded an organization, Enterprising Latinas, to recruit and train women to open family child care homes. I think her goal was 23. She ended up with 31. They all passed the test. We greatly expanded the capacity for high-quality early learning in South County, and it's just, I can't say enough about going to the community and listening to what their needs are.
A lot of transition and change on the data front in what we do. There's a pre and post child assessment for BBK and a new kindergarten readiness indicator, the STAR kindergarten readiness indicator for when kids enter kindergarten. A lot of information on child assessment. With new legislation in the state, also a lot of new information on program assessment. Our coalition is observing for 2+ hours 1,500 different early childhood classrooms and providing so-called class scores from those observations. And so that's going to be another wealth of data and information. And I think on that program assessment front, this is all rather new. I think we're at the beginning of really thinking about how we can use that data, but I'm really excited as we're convening all of the professional development practitioners, of which we have about 18, but there's probably another 18 in the county that are working with early childhood teachers, to use that data collaboratively to see where we can fill gaps and how we can do better in training our teachers across the county.
We use data for everything that we have to do because our funders make us. I'm not a data person, but I've learned, and I've got spreadsheets of spreadsheets. I never thought I'd be doing this. But we decided, like on pregnancy medical homes, where we put the pregnancy medical homes. We looked at where children were out of care, where there was the highest substance abuse. We look at heat maps for adolescent health, where there are issues with juvenile justice, so that we can start doing more initiatives on adolescent health and interventions in that area, rather than going somewhere else where it's not needed. So Luckily, my partner in crime is an epidemiologist, and she would be able to be a lot more effective at explaining all that than I would.
Well, and I would like to make sure that as you all think about your data, as the rest of you in this community think about your data, that remember that you do have a community partner resource right here available to you. The state of Florida has many colleges and universities who have individuals in there who love data. In fact, I'm looking at two, raise your hands, Jason and Howard, who are our colleagues at the university here, who are here and available and want to be involved and want to be engaged in the conversation and want to use their skill sets and their knowledge and expertise to bring to bear on the questions that you may have. And, as a university person, we work in several spaces. Not only do we deal with the data, but we help to train and we help to prepare individuals across the board, whether they be classroom teachers or social workers or other professionals who are working in your space. So I absolutely encourage you to take advantage of that resource that is in your backyard, in your community. So before we open up to questions, I thought I'd ask one more for you, which is, what activities and skills do you think that parents can do that will be really impactful and very supportive of ensuring that their toddlers and preschoolers are ready for school? From your space and from your vantage point, what are some of the things you'd like to see or suggest that parents do?
I'll start. One is, as we learned today, the talking to the baby, and it's never too early. I'm all about reading prenatally. Start those habits early, and this probably won't be very popular, but put the cell phone down and look and talk to the baby, because I think too much, we all have a compulsion to see what somebody had to say or whatever, but when you have a baby with you, you really need to be present with that baby and focus on that child.
Yeah, I echo all that. I mean, obviously, reading and literacy is important in the home, and helping them to be able to connect to the agencies that can support them in that if they're challenged with that. Definitely, social skills are huge. I mean, our kindergarten teachers are dealing with that quite often these days, where students are very, very challenged. They cannot, grasp the reading and the learning because they just can't sit. They can't, make good choices. And so it's a lot of it's those kind of things, and it really is the presence of the adults. During those first 5 years can really help, and then having great access to early childhood programs, quality childhood programs, and being able to really understand and communicate this to others along their family pipeline. Because one of the things we have in schools is we have lots of kids, but we have lots of parents who have other kids, and they're out there in the community. And we just want to make sure that they all understand, that we're here as a school district to help. But boy, do we have help out there in our community, and they can get connected.
I think the biggest point that I would stress with parents is make every single moment a teachable moment. There's not anything that goes on in your life, in the life of a child every day, that can't be turned into a teachable moment. And if we do that and we speak to them in love language and keep them safe, because as I said earlier, the family looks very, very different today than it did 10 years ago. So we have to make sure that the mistakes that a child makes are teachable moments, that every mistake is a learning opportunity and not an opportunity for discipline. So teachable moments.
And I think that one was very well answered by my learned colleagues.
And with that, we'll open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions for anyone on our panel? There are mics there and there.
I just have a quick question. I couldn't find it online, but is Healthy Mommies, Healthy Babies still longer in Hillsborough County?
No. Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, which was a statewide initiative in the 90s, maybe. I think Healthy Start Coalition is probably takes that umbrella.
Hi, I'm Howard Goldstein at USF, and I really appreciate the challenge that you have shared with us. But we're easy converts. We're already doing this work, and I guess the question I have is, how do we get the community involved? There are so many sectors that would be so excited about being part of Old Beginnings, a mission for our county, or maybe smaller communities, whatever makes the most sense. We need to somehow get to family members and the community, these various sectors in the community. I think about media, the print media, broadcast media, social media. I think about healthcare and our nurses and our pediatricians, transportation, our social workers, our librarians. There are so many folks that you've alluded to that would contribute greatly to this effort if we could figure out how to, do what you referred to earlier on, Nicole, in terms of collective impact. But we need to get them involved early enough so that they're telling the same story that you're telling, that they're speaking the same language, and we have a community mission. How can we do that?
I'll take a little bit of a crack at that. Howard, excellent points that you made, and I think you mentioned a lot of the constituencies that are going to be important to this. Having come from the corporate world, I would mention another constituency, and that's kind of our companies across our community as well. I think we can do a lot more to get them involved. And let me give you just one brief story of something that we did just within the last year. Most of you know that Casper's company owns the McDonald's restaurants across our area. We have a program that's been long in existence, but not very much used in our county or across the state, called CCEP, or Child Care Executive Partnership. That program matches dollar for dollar any corporate gifts that are given towards the school readiness program. We started talking with Blake Casper and his team about how we might do something in his company, given the fact that we had a wait list for school readiness, and they had folks that were working in McDonald's restaurants that were showing leadership potential, but in some cases couldn't take the promotion because it meant they were going to have to work so many hours and they couldn't afford childcare. And so Casper's and Company put $50,000 in. We matched it with $50,000. That's allowing us in Hillsborough, Pinellas, Polk, Pasco, and Duval, but mostly in Hillsborough, to serve about 120 emerging leaders in McDonald's restaurants and get them subsidized quality childcare that they wouldn't otherwise have and wouldn't have been able to accept the promotion. And we want to, that's just the very beginning, but we want to do a tremendous amount more moving forward. And to your point, it takes a little bit of a lot of things in order to really get the community engaged.
So I'll add to that, because I think that's one of the ways we play a huge role in this as a school district. So our footprint is huge. I mean, we have not only early learning spaces in our schools, the K-12 system. We have 4 technical colleges. We have the ability to train and partner, with local agencies. But then we have parents, right? We have parents who also own businesses and have companies in all spaces of our community. And so it's really how you engage the masses. And I think that's one of the roles that I see the school district playing, as I said in that very first question. We can help everyone understand the compelling why, because we ultimately are going to be the ones that graduate our students into post-secondary and the workforce. So, and with that, we can provide the data along the continuum to point back to the early learning space and say, this is why, rather than investing $13 to $14 billion nationally in deficits, which we do, by the way, we spend it in all kinds of funding sources that take care of deficits once students enter the K-12 system. But what would the world look like in this right here in this nation if we took those dollars and invested them early and realized we can solve all those deficits in the early learning space, and then really build off the strength of all of our kids, and then build a workforce that you would not ever see any other nation competing against. That's what we feel like we as a school district can bring to this equation to ultimately, build that whole story out for the community to get them engaged. And like I said, that's why, the president, CEO of the chamber has been part of Teach Me Early. We wanted him to be part of that conversation from the very beginning. Getting some of those folks, our parent organizations across Hillsborough County. Great part of how they understand. Ms. Allen was here just earlier, but our county council PTA president was here, engaging all of our parents around the importance of early learning. So the more voices we have out in the community saying the same message and aligning the same message, that's when all of a sudden people who need to help us make changes. We may probably need some more space in this community for early learning if we want to build capacity. Businesses and locations might be able to help us in that world. We may need a further investment in the future with regard to access for early learning. The more people that understand how that's the game changer, they'll be willing to invest early in order to get the result later on. So that's where I really feel like we're starting to kind of ebb into those spaces of the community to really change the whole conversation.
I also would add, I think it's very important to recognize the fact that our community has been and is currently very, very supportive. The Children's Board is a huge funder of the Early Learning Coalition. It's not just state and federal money, it's community money. The United Way is a large funder. We did a new collaboration for displaced families from Hurricane Irma and Maria with the Community Foundation and the United Way. And so there is a lot of community collaboration as it exists already. And Kelley, thank you for that, and thank you for being one of my board members.
That's why I said that.
Sharon Miller. I represent a private provider in zip code 33605. I also provide services in 33610. And if you look at the census tract map, you will know that we have high poverty, unemployment, and that pretty much shapes the context of our service area. However, I do appreciate the conversations in the room this morning. I would like to propose to Mr. Gillette and Ms. Parris, if such a vehicle does not exist, that we begin to think about how we can bridge the gap for working families who qualify for very little school readiness. At BBK, they end up having to pay a wraparound fee in order for their children to stay all day in a center. How do we begin to have the conversation to free up some dollars to begin to help bridge that gap? Because they're working families. They don't quite meet the poverty guideline. And for private providers, such as the one that I represent, as we raise our tuition fees to increase quality in our child care centers, we kind of freeze them out of the market because they're already strapped for cash to pay child care services. So if that conversation is not there, we will definitely call the Children's Board to see about ASO funds, but we just need to know how they help those
That
parents.
conversation has started. That conversation started as a couple of weeks ago over an issue with the ASO actually, and looking at what the Children's Board, just when I thought we had literally pretty much all the bases covered, I get a request for the ASO from someone that was deemed ineligible for school readiness. And so now we are looking at what we can do, how we can access those individuals that were eligible become ineligible or deemed ineligible to begin with, and what we can do for those individuals. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I don't know that it's going to be dollars to pay, or it's going to be FTEs to navigate, or how that's going to look, but we have started that conversation. Thank you.
I would also add, as the next person comes up, I believe United Way is in here. I know some folks from United Way. There we are. So this conversation, or this question that you've raised, United Way is a part of that conversation, because United Way National, and I know a lot of local United Ways, have really started to focus on ALICE families, right? So ALICE families are asset limited, income constrained, and employed families. They are working families, the families you just described. And so United Way nationally as well as locally is also a part of this conversation to support those families. And so I think that is also a part of this push, a part of this collective impact, that each of these organizations are coming to the table with their piece of the pie, but there are many more out there who are also having the exact same conversation and trying to push for positive outcomes for children and families in their part as well. And so I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about it.
Sure. I'm Ellen Zinzalette. I'm the Director of Education Strategies at United Way Suncoast, and we are working on that issue. I want to say first that I appreciate how these 4 organizations are working together. I've been in early learning in this community for about almost 30 years, and I haven't ever seen it work like this before. It's really, really heartening to see. And I know that Jeff says that you have to start slow to get where you're going sometimes, and I know that things are being formed and that they take time to develop collaborations. So we are kind of working on 2 paths. So there are the leaders, the CEOs of these 4 key organizations, and then what we're doing in United Way is looking at the data and the families, and we're leading the campaign for grade level reading in Hillsborough County. And so as part of that, so these folks are looking at the whole county, and what we've decided to do to start while everything else is being organized is to identify one area in the county that we'll focus on. And so we actually have the ALICE data, which again are those families. You know, we all know that the federal poverty level is really old, and it really doesn't address current needs. So United Way nationally has funded a research project that looks within each county at what does it really take to make it as a family. And so they've looked at childcare, housing, transportation, I may be forgetting one, there are about 5, but they've looked at how much does it actually cost, and they've come up with a survival budget for a family of 4 and for an individual. And so what we're doing is we have that now at the census tract level, so we can really look within our county to see where these families are. We're also doing mapping. We're looking at where are the schools, where are the catchment areas, where are the early learning programs, and doing this collaboratively for the past 6 months or so. We're on the verge of choosing one location within the community, and we're working with the frontline managers. So, there's the whole county, and then there's diving deeply in one area, and that's what we're doing right now. And it's based on the data, and we are working with our partners to get data. Julie's in the group, the ELC's in the group, everyone's working to bring that to fruition. So you'll hear more in the future about that.
Thank you. Yeah, one more question right here.
My name is Cynthia Rodriguez. I'm also a private provider. Excuse me. My question or my thoughts are on BBK Teachers. Since BBK Teachers are something that the school system and the private providers have in common, is there any conversations or anything happening to build a common workforce between the school system and the private providers so that we can make a BBK teacher in the school system is considered a professional? In my world, we're considered caregivers who happen to have a BBK certificate. We all do the same thing, and there's probably more BBK teachers in the private sector actually than there is right now in the school system. So my question is there any way we can build a collaboration between that in terms of training to make those trainings equal for everybody, to make our message and our outcomes to the children in BBK programs, and also to provide benefits for these teachers? We are constantly losing our BBK teachers to other jobs because they have a skill level or an ambition, and they don't have the benefits that they need in terms of retirement, health care, or whatever to do that. And we in the small business as a private provider cannot provide that. So is there any way we can work together with the school system and form a BBK workforce that serves both the school system and the private providers?
And that's certainly one of the, as Gordon had said earlier, as we kind of align kind of our partnership and working from our kindergarten space all the way down into our early learning space. Part of that is aligning the expectation, the training around the delivery for students. So I think, now I know the head of the ELC has been a strong advocate for increased funding, and he's done everything he can on that end to try to, get that further investment, at all different levels. But we certainly, as a school district, that is our conversation right now, is how we can really create an aligned workforce, just like you said, out in our community, so that when students, no matter where they're being touched out in our community, Head Start as well, that they are touched in an equitable fashion so that they are prepared for that first day of care.
And we're very excited to work in this collaborative with the district to do more. As Jeff mentioned, funding is an issue, especially with BBK. Florida is 42nd out of 44 states that offer free kindergarten programs and funding, with a base student allotment of $2,400. The average closer to $3,700 nationwide. And so we've got a lot of work to do on the legislative front as well to help improve this.
Good morning, Carl Parris, Hillsborough County Human Services. I'd like to thank the panel for sharing a lot of information with us this morning. So let me set the scenario. Here in Hillsborough County, we already know we have a great coalition of partners and many providers that provide a variety of services throughout the county. So in some ways, in comparison to other counties and other areas, we're looked at resource rich, which kind of limits us in some capacity of trying to get resources here from federal and state, because we have the wherewithal to do things that other entities can't do. And we've identified gaps in our services, and we've identified gaps in the community where we're having issues, the targeted zip codes that we all know about. And we talk about things such as building workforces and recruiting and training and licensing for new providers. That's kind of the traditional way of doing things, and we know that takes time. And as Kelley had said earlier, the family structure is different nowadays. You don't have the traditional family structure. You have people, aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends of families taking care of children in their homes and doing different things for folks to get by. And with all the great programs we have, and in some cases, at no cost or little cost, people still have challenges in terms of getting to those services, whether it be that they don't know about it, whether it be communications, promotions, issues with transportation, or just different family issues. They cannot avail themselves of those services. So it would seem to me that at some point we're going to have to approach this maybe in a non-traditional way. And maybe the sea change in this is, rather than us looking at providing services as we have, maybe it could be something as simple as us thinking of bringing services to the home, to these non-traditional homes where folks are just kind of caring for the kids and maybe just letting them play all day or watch television all day. Maybe it could be something as simple as us developing some kind of an in-home training module that the unprofessional caregiver could access on their computers at home, which would have the framework that the professional providers have at the licensed child care homes and that sort of thing, that would at least provide some kind of framework for those non-professional folks that are just kind of caring for the kid at home, to give them a framework to maybe help service some of that gap while we're trying to build our traditional models of filling those holes that might help with broadening our capacity for the 0 to 5. But the whole point is, I think we as a group, we just got to try to find new non-traditional ways of expanding our base, utilizing the folks that are caring for our kids, for those that aren't in our traditional, in our official care operations.
I think your point is very well taken. I think Kelley, in fact, you gave a really good example of that and stuff in one of the programs you all started.
And we fund multiple programs that go into the home, so we are looking more and more at these non-traditional homes, especially the generation of kinship care and fictive care individuals that need support. So we are looking at that and supporting it considerably with safe and stable family money.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We're on a very tight schedule, but I will encourage you, if you'd like to come on up front and or to find us in one of the rooms in our breakout